Hi, everybody. We're just going to give everyone a couple of minutes, as is a nice thing to do. So just hang tight and we'll get started here in just a couple. All right. Without further ado, I think we've given everybody the extra couple minute chance there, and they can keep rolling in if they want to. So thank you all for being here. This is the Silent Nights Secure Sites pre-holiday IT prep for a restful break webinar. It is our last webinar of the year, and we've got some really cool stuff, definitely a little on the techie side. So for those of you who haven't seen Bacon before, you're going to see kind of one of our most intricate kind of capabilities. A lot of our stuff is meant to be really easy and simple to use, but sometimes when you need to do something really particular, you need tools that can do some of those extra capabilities, and particularly when you're talking about security or your own very unique services or configurations, that's when this becomes really, really handy. So we're going to be focusing on that largely today. But before we do that, I'm going to get into some introductions and some quick housekeeping. Then I'll do an overview, and then Dave's going to actually show the software and these specific examples of things you can do to automate trouble out of your life and make it so that you can go home on the weekends or on vacation or for the holidays and not worry too much about your systems being healthy unless they reach out and use our monitoring system to tell you so. So with that, Dave, are you ready to get started?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Awesome. Well, let's just do some quick intros so they know who the heck we are. My name is John Marcato, and I'm the CTO and co-founder of Bacon. And joining me today is Dave Adekoya. We've been kind of the webinar team for a little while now, although I did not historically always do them, and neither did Dave. But here we are. So we're going to try and give you great content today. Dave's one of our senior engineers and a great demo guy, and he is going to take us through the nitty-gritty today when we get there. But before we do that, like I said, we're going to do some housekeeping. So why don't we run through that real quick here, Dave? First thing is my favorite part. We want to give you a really soft, awesome t-shirt. So Christmas or Hanukkah present there. And all we need from you is for you to fill out the survey, which will include entering your address. We can send that out to you. They are very soft. I'm actually wearing one right now. That is not a joke. And I highly recommend getting one. Also want to talk a little bit about our online YouTube channel. So if you want to see a lot of different little videos, how-tos, these are great to get familiar with the product. A lot of our clients use them for training. They're great little tidbits. There's 110 or so up there. We add a new one but every week, sometimes a couple, and refresh old ones and so forth. So great. You can just search Bacon Unlimited and you'll find our channel really easily on YouTube. So that's kind of the main stuff for housekeeping. Wanted to get that out of the way. But also we're going to do a couple of polls, And before we launch the polls here, Lane, Lane is working for us in the background here, controlling all of the levers and things. So she is the unseen force helping us. And I just want to make sure, in case anybody hasn't used GoToWebinar before, we're going to do some polls in here. You just click on the polls here when we launch those. But you can also ask questions, and there's a whole section on that in the little drop down. You just drop down and type your question. And so if there's anything you don't understand, we'll try to answer it live, or we'll get back to you with it later. But usually we get them all in live, and they often make for some interesting content. So please do use that. With that said, I think, Lane, we're ready. If you want to launch the first of the two polls. What operating systems do you support? So any or all of these, if you wouldn't mind putting those in there, we do support all of those. With that, we will use that to help gear a little bit of the conversation. And people are filling it out, and that's exciting. And everybody always has Windows, and then there's always a mix of others, right? So roughly 50 to 60% have Mac, iOS, and/or Linux, and 100% have Windows. So pretty strong showing, and that'll finish up there in just a second, and then we'll do the second poll. So poll number one, yeah, 100% Windows, and you can see kind of the breakdown there of what everybody has. So that's great information. We're going to launch one more poll, and then we're going to jump into it. So we try to move this along quickly, but important to get these things. So we do a lot with security, and a lot of people trying to meet controls. So if you are utilizing any of these control sets or have to comply with any of these requirements, please let us know that. We're seeing a pretty good little mix in here already. Wow, I can't believe how even it is. I typically see a lot of NIST or a lot of HIPAA, depending on the audience, and a ton of PCI, but we almost equal with CIS and ISO. NIST and PCI kind of in the lead there. But wow, almost like a pretty even blend. That's not always the result that we get, so it's kind of interesting.
Good to know.
Yep, and this one will close here in just a second, and those results will pop up there, so you can see what I saw, which is pretty even across the board, although NIST is the highest, and we've had to deal with that quite a bit. So anybody who's doing FedRAMP is working with NIST, so and a lot of other people are because they want to be, and some people need to be, so it's not uncommon. And of course, credit cards, PCI, so a lot of stuff there. Great, well, that's really helpful, everybody. I'm going to give a quick overview of what the product does, so if you haven't seen it before, you kind of know why we exist and what we are. What is Bacon? Bacon is an endpoint management platform. It's security first, it's cross-platform. It's really easy to use, and that it was designed, it's a much more modern tool than a lot of the stuff that's in the marketplace. It's a marketplace where a lot of the tools were made even before the year 2000. Some were made just after, but then there was kind of a lull after that where there was a lot of companies kind of merging together and stuff, but not as many new tools out there. So that's been kind of the challenge in this area of IT. And so this tool was designed to be much more modern so that it could be upgraded quickly and add new features quickly, and also be easily cross-platform, right? Which is something that was very hard, I think, in the ancient history of 15 or 20 years ago. So that's one of the big benefits as well. So yeah, Mac, Linux, and Windows, it's going to do those equally. It's going to do MDM on iOS and also on Mac OS. Mac OS is kind of the Frankenstein there because you need to sort of talk to it in an API MDM way as well as in sort of an agent way, and we do that. One of the great things about Bacon is it's really great over very long distances when people are working from all different places. So as you can probably imagine, we got very, very busy during COVID, and that has not stopped. So people working from home, working in different offices, traveling on the road, their machines are always securely connected to Bacon no matter where they are. And that means that you as IT people have control over those systems and have information about those systems. And that's kind of leads to another key point about Bacon that you won't find in a lot of MDM systems, certainly, and some endpoint managers even struggle with it. which is more of that real-time data access. So not only do you want to be able to install software or patches quickly and things like that, but you also want to know what the system actually has. If you find out 4 hours from now what the inventory was 4 hours ago, that's not nearly as good as what it was 15 seconds ago, because that's how you make real-time decisions and do your work. So Bacon is exceptional at that, and we use an ultra-thin, very secure protocol that allows for really, really good performance for all the little communications that go back and forth without taking a lot of bandwidth. And we do that over an AES-256 encrypted channel, so it's a really nice way of doing it. With that said, that's kind of what it is and sort of why it is, or why you should use it. Is really back to that idea that you need to have security in today's IT environment. You need to have total control, visibility in your environments, and you also want to have automation. So if you need to do that in cross-platform environment, or even just a mostly Windows environment, it's really handy to have a tool where you go to one interface and you can see all of your endpoints and mobile devices. So that's kind of the main concept behind Bacon, and we find that people are using it, have shaved off tremendous amount of time. We have a great testimonial. We have a bunch of them actually on our website, baconunlimited.com. But one of them, we do interviews with clients when we get a chance to do it, and when they say it's okay, we put up these testimonials, which are all direct words from them. We even have them approve the doc before it goes out. One of them, California Fair Plan, which is the insurance agency, the de facto quasi-governmental insurance agency in California that gives you fire insurance, since all the insurance companies aren't giving out fire insurance anymore. California Fair Plan does, and they've grown massively in staff because of the need for that. So they were doing everything manually, and they got Bacon, and they went from hiring a new IT person for basically every 40 or 50 other employees they hired to not having to hire any more IT people while tripling in size in 1 year. So Bacon really can help you automate away a lot of your troubles, and also just keep much, much better tabs on your systems, and also keep them in a secure state. So it's not antivirus, but we do work with any antivirus on the market, so we know if you have it, if it's running. That's one of the many security checks and balances it has in there. But we are not like those. There's a few endpoint management tools out there that like to make really low-end antivirus. I don't recommend using low-end antivirus, even if you get it for free. Free is not always better. In fact, it's rarely better in these kinds of situations. So I've gotten that question a lot. Do you guys make antivirus? Nope, that's $100 million research project, and I'd rather use SentinelOne or Cortex or CrowdStrike for something that's really, really effective rather than trying to make something that just checks a box. So we don't do that, and we have no plans to. With that said, we do a lot of other things, and Dave's going to show you some of the funnest ones today. So Dave, I think with that, unless there's anything else I missed, I'm ready to give you the floor and let you show people some cool stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we're good to start.
All right.
All right, so for this demo or this webinar walkthrough, we're going to look at some security-focused examples in Bacon. And then from there, we're going to transition to a general overview of Bacon. I'll try to explain different pieces as best I can before the overview, just so you understand what different things I'm pointing my mouse at and how things work under the hood. So to start off with, we want to take a look at how Bacon handles encrypted drives, or more importantly, or more specifically, the escrowing of those keys. So for this, we're going to be looking at BitLocker on Windows as well as FileVault on Mac OS. So to start off with, I'm going to take a look at my Windows machine. So in here, I've set up a webinar VM with full BitLocker encryption. So in Bacon, we're able to see who's encrypted, both on that overview page, which we'll look at later, as well as through the individual machines menu. So here I'm on this endpoint detail page. I'm going to go over to disk, and then I'm going to see that my C drive is encrypted. Now this is an Azure VM, so the temp drive is this D drive. It's like an ephemeral storage thing. It's not encrypted. We don't really worry too much about it, but the main OS drive here is. And so over here on the right, I can see BitLocker in the drive label, in this case C. Then I have an action here that lets me view that drive. So what it's going to do, once I click view, It's going to ask me for my password. This is like my admin password for Bacon. I'll type that in. Then it's going to return back with my recovery key. And so this is escrowed on the Windows side of things. We're pulling this every hour. So every hour we're checking the machine to make sure we have the most up-to-date recovery key. This is going to be completely outside of Active Directory or anything like that. So you always have somewhere you can go to grab that key. Even if the machine's not functioning, if it hasn't checked in a while, we have the last seen key, which should work on that machine. Now for Mac OS, it's a little bit different. I'm going to switch environments over to my dev environment and pull this one up. So with Mac OS, they kind of have a different way of handling these keys. On the Windows side, we can actually retrieve that key anytime we need, as long as we have the permission to do so. For Mac OS, we're actually going through MDM. As John said, it's a little bit different in how you have to handle it. It's just how Apple wants to do it. And in this case, when you encrypt the drive on Mac OS through MDM, it's going to give you that recovery key that you're going to need. And then after that point, it doesn't actually show you anymore. So ahead of time, we have already encrypted this drive. If I look in the disk here, we can see it's fully encrypted. And then we can, just like before, see our file vault recovery key here. I'll go to view. And again, I'll type in my password for this environment. And we're able to pull back that key as well. Though, again, do keep in mind, this is specific through the MDM channel that we're actually pushing this and getting the key back. That's more of like an Apple requirement. So we are kind of always abiding by what OEM recommends, in this case, Apple, what they recommend and how they want us to manage these machines. So from there, we're going to take a look at how to enforce some different security protocols. So there's a lot of ways to do it in Bacon. We can run scripts, of course, we can execute programs, all that kind of good stuff. But for this one, I wanted to stick to something that we'd use for enforcing a baseline configuration. So I've just included some very simple examples, and that goes through our profiles and states engine. And so how this works is the states are individual configurations, like set a registry key, configure this service, stuff like that. And then those are combined into profiles, which is like a container, and then that's pushed out to machines. So in this case, I have a couple states. Oops, let me switch environments here. Over here. There we go. I have a couple states I've made for this webinar, and they're pretty simple things. We have an option of disabling Bluetooth, disabling USB storage, enabling all firewall profiles. In this case, that's going to be Windows firewall, and then creating a login notice. So under the hood, these are all just made in YAML. There's a very simple syntax that you can learn, as well as we have GitHub repository with different examples that you can download, where we've gone through and we've created like hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 or so templates of common security things, also dumping the entire LGPO library into state form. So if it's an LGPO, we already have a pre-made state. You can just copy it, change the variables how you need, and get going. So here we're looking at a method to disable USB storage. We're doing this over registry mostly because it allows you to disable USB storage access without having to restart the machine. So here, if I set this key, this value start to the value of 4, it's going to stop any kind of USB device access when it comes to storage. If you set to 3, it then re-enables it. So this will disable that for us. I also have one to disable Bluetooth. That's pretty simple, where we're going to go ahead and just stop that Bluetooth service on Windows. So we'll disable that service. And keep in mind, every time this profile applies, and that is a time frame you can set, every 15 minutes, hour, day, week, it's going to reinforce all these configuration changes. So even if an application or an update or the user changes it, it's going to reapply that configuration. And that becomes a little bit more important as we kind of keep going on with this example towards how we can get alerts whenever we have any kind of config drift. Next up for the profiles, again, very simple. We're going to go through here, and I actually have a little shortcut. Rather than listing off the domain, the private, and the public profiles individually and doing enable, 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 I actually have the option just using all profiles. So very simply, it's pretty readable. When firewall.enabled, name all profiles. It's going to force all of these on. Again, if anything's modified, it's going to turn them back on next time this profile is reapplied. And then lastly, our login notice. So this is something you'll see in a lot of different systems. Sometimes it's a requirement or just proper form, where it's going to give you an option to set a title and a description, which we'll see whenever we remote into this VM. So with that, we take all these states, we combine them into a profile. And this is pushing out every week in this case. Previously it was every hour, but just for the webinar, I don't want it spamming my logs. So every week, and it's going to apply these 4 configurations to my webinar group. In that group, I have one Windows and one Mac OS machine. Keep in mind that for profiles and states, they are going to be OS specific, right? We don't have Windows Firewall and Mac. So when you make the states, you'll have to make them different for the operating systems. In this case, we're just covering Windows. So I have this guy right here that we're going to take a look at. So over here, this is our machine. I want to show you what it looks like whenever you actually push these out the first time and then subsequent attempts from there. If I look at my logs here, this logs option is going to allow you to see the logs of any job that this machine was involved in. So in this case, I have different things I've set up for webinars, but I'm really focusing on this baseline compliance profile. So I'll type in baseline and look for the first time this job ran, which is right down here. And so here we can see an example of output. So before we saw we're enabling all profiles. So here I can see all firewall profiles have been enabled. I have one for disable Bluetooth. This Bluetooth service has been disabled and is in the desired state. I have one for USB storage, which is it added this registry key and set the value for me. And then I have the ones for logon title and logon text, which is telling me it set the policy and what the policies have been changed to. So this allows you to kind of very granularly go through and make sure your machines are either configured properly or see if they did change or if there was any drift, that kind of thing, through all these different job logs. And going back to this endpoint page, I was hoping to take a look at this thing, but it looks like it's actually offline. Let me see if I can fix that really quick. I've just been Azure auto shutdown enabled. Pretty uncommon. Give me 1 second here. We'll see if we can get this back online so we can take a look at that example. Yep, that would do it. All right, let me kick this VM back on. And we'll give it some time to reconnect. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for this, we're going to skip ahead. I will return back to the demo if I can, or like the actual logging in of the machine if it starts up for me. But in the meantime, let's take a look at the other side. So I've been talking about how to push out the policy. I've also spoke about how to see if the policy has been deployed, but there's another option here, which is the monitoring side. As John said, we can let you know if your machines need your attention. So in that case, if you go over to monitoring, here we're able to actually use different rules auto-created for us. So whenever you make a profile in Bacon, we all automatically create a rule, and we can set this up to generate tickets or send emails or simply just alert to the UI of if this rule had to be enacted. So it's going to look on every machine and see, did I have to do any part of this rule to change the configuration? If so, let's trigger an alert. Because in this case, we're pushing out these automatic configs, and we want to make sure that they're actually active on the machines. That's the most important part. It's not enough to just have the configuration. It has to be something you can hold accountable because you can audit it. So in this case, I have the same exact name for my rule over here as it was for my profile, this December 23 web baseline compliance example. If I go here, I've set it to send an email alert to me once per day at midnight. And what this is going to do is whenever my machines trigger this, let's say if my webinar machine was not configured properly, it's going to go ahead and send me an email saying, hey, this rule had to be enacted. So I, as an admin, know there was some kind of drift detected. If this isn't a brand new machine, then that's something I do want to take a look at and I do want to figure out. Now, it looks like, unfortunately, my Azure VM is not coming back online, so I can't show you the actual demo. What I'll do instead then is I'll make a Bacon Bits video over on our YouTube channel of what this configuration actually looks like, so you can take a look at it at a later time, just so you can see like the little login screen and how the services and the firewall are properly configured. That's, you know, the next best thing I can do if I can't do it live. But from here, John, that's mainly what we had for the security focused side of the webinar. Unless you have anything else to add, I can kind of start with the overview and we can go through the other features, kind of talk over patching and other stuff like that.
No, I think sometimes if it breaks in the environment, then we'll just switch it up. So let's do the general overview and give people a sense for what bacon does. And like you said, we'll just make another bacon bit and make sure everybody gets that.
Yep, sounds good to me. All right, so let's kind of reset here. We're going to go back to the overview page and walk you through just our standard like demo, what we do. Keep in mind, if you have any additional questions, we're happy to answer. You can put them in the chat there. We can jump on those. Or, of course, you can follow up with us, and we're happy to do personalized demos that kind of talk over your specific use cases. So here, looking at the overview page, this is what you see when you first log into Bacon, kind of where we started. And there's different widgets that I skipped over that I want to kind of cover. So we saw alert. This is a visual representation of what our alerts table looks like. Over here, it'll actually like break it down for you and tell you which kind of endpoint triggered it, what the rule was, what the severity is when it was triggered. And this allows you to kind of like dismiss or kind of deep dive to see what's going on here. Next up, we have endpoints. So which endpoints are online versus offline, as well as what operating systems you're running in your environment. Aside from that, we have patches. So how many patches or packages do you have available for deployment? We have quite a few here in our demo lab, just so we have a nice graphic, as well as antivirus protection. So another security focused one. So how this works is we're able to have you specify different services that we'll mark as AV that contribute to this counter. So that means that you could specify something like CrowdStrike, but if you're, let's say, middle of an acquisition or you're making a change or maybe you're trialing a product, you can select other services like Sentinel-1 or any other AV services you'd like. We actually allow you to pick any service under the sun. We don't have to like try to auto detect or auto validate. It's completely in your control. And then that's how we can contribute to this number here. When we're looking at the service side, we're actually able to tell that it's really running, because that's the important part. You can have it installed, but if it's broken or the user's disabled it somehow, it's not doing you a lot of good. So that's how we can track that here. On the other side, we can also track encrypted hard drives. Now, in our demo lab, most of these don't have their VTPM enabled, so we have to take a little tiny sliver down here with the ones that actually are, but it's basically impossible to click. But we have a couple. There's one encrypted drive, and I think it's my VM. So that's going to show you which of your drives are encrypted or unencrypted. And depending on your policy, maybe this is supposed to be all green, and so this is a good indicator to take a look at what's going on there. Next up, we saw some of monitoring, but I want to cover it a little bit better. So in monitoring, we have the option of making different rules. These can be things like performance counters, so CPU uptime, or excuse me, CPU utilization, memory utilization, as well as disk util. And these have different thresholds that you can set for both how long it spends over a certain percentage, right? That's always going to be important. We also have things for tracking services. So our services running, our machines offline, and even some things around patching where you can see, do you have patches older than a certain time frame? Maybe your tolerance is 14 or 21 days, and you want to get alerted whenever a machine breaches that. Or alternatively, maybe it's more of a patch count. How many patches do you have available? And you want to know if there's been a lot of failed patches, if machines haven't been taken care of, and your threshold's 10. We can tell you if anyone's got 10 or more patches available to deploy. In addition, with our latest managed package feature, we are also able to tell if people have software that's out of date. So if it's in a repository, we can report back on if that software needs to be updated on certain machines or if they're missing that software. Once those different rules are triggered, we saw the alerts table, it moves over to alerts. Now we have direct integration with Jira and Autotask on the API level, and that allows us to both create and resolve tickets in those systems, although we also have the email capability. So most ticketing systems have an email ingestion like endpoint of some sort. So you can just send it over there, you can send it to your IT team, your distribution groups, that kind of thing with your alert raised and alert solved emails. Next up, we have outages. So I'm a huge fan of making sure that people always respect alerts and they act on them. And one of the biggest indicators, or one of the biggest keys to that, I should say, or success metrics is, do we properly utilize outages? We never want to train people to ignore server downs. We don't want to say, oh, it's supposed to be down, or oh, someone's working on it. That's pretty poor form. Instead, we use outages to completely suppress those alerts until that maintenance work is done. And then lastly, we have a knock dashboard. This shows you just a visual indicator of the health of your environment. So you can see here at a glance which machines may need your attention, which machines are offline, and which ones are all good to go. Keep in mind with Bacon, most things are interactive, so we are able to click on these. It's going to bring me to those endpoint detail pages like we were seeing before. Now, over in the endpoints table, this is one of the main views in Bacon, in my opinion. This is going to show you a lot of different data points that are pulling back. Every time I do this webinar, the list gets a little bit longer, but you can see things here like IP address, who's currently logged in, serial number is always going to be a really good one. And like most tables, this can be exported into an Excel spreadsheet. So you're able to pull all that kind of inventory data directly from the system whenever you need it. We took a little bit of a look at the endpoint detail page before, so let's see if I can pull that up. And so here we have 8 different tiles up top, and then this is going to change what we see at the bottom. So right now we're in system, and we can see a little bit more detail than what we saw in the endpoint detail or the endpoint table itself. And so here we can see we have things like memory usage and overall capacity. That's something that's not going to be on the other table. On the right-hand side, we have things like tags and notes. So any tags and notes that you add are the same ones that your coworkers are going to see. And these tags can be added easily by just typing in here, or if I left-click, I can pull open a list of pre-made tags. And of course, notes can always be typed in here pretty simply as well and then saved. We saw the disk info, so it's going to list any kind of disks that this machine has. In this case, it just has one C drive. We can see network information, so what is the name of your interface, IPv4 and v6 address, and MAC address. It's always going to be super handy for any kind of like ARP table crawling you have to do. Over in policies, we can see what's been deployed. So on my last VM, the webinar one, we would see our baseline compliance profile in here. We can also see what what groups this device is a member of. So in Bacon, we have 2 different kinds of groups. We have your static groups. Those are going to be good for adding machines to a group, and it stays that way until an admin comes and changes it. For dynamic groups, those are actually going to use our endpoints table along with some filters, so it can logically decide or intelligently decide who needs to be in what group. So I can do things like filter for all Windows machines that are online on a certain IP range, let's say 192.168.42. And then it'll pull all those into a group for me automatically as long as they meet that criteria. That group can then be used to either push out monitors, to push out software, to apply profiles like we saw before, and other things like that. So it becomes very handy. It's also just a good indicator of where your environment sits and just some metadata around how it works. So huge fan of dynamic groups. Definitely use them. As you can see, we have tons of different examples in here. Over on the software side, we can see what's installed. So all the software installed here can also be easily uninstalled by mousing over here and going to uninstall. Right before that actions column, we also see the number of endpoints. This is going to show you the machines that share the same software and version as what we're looking at here. So I can easily say that there's going to be 12 machines that have some version of the Bacon Remote Agent on here, probably just the Windows one here. Over in services, it's going to be very similar. We're going to see the services and then see the status if they're stopped, if they're running, that kind of thing, with the option to start and stop them here. Now, we also have the mark as antivirus feature. This is what I was talking about earlier on the overview page. This is how you can mark any service as antivirus. And what you're going to see in the system is we're able to pick any service at all, even if it's not AV. So there's no risk of you using a product we haven't seen or we haven't added to the list. So as you can see here, we have Windows Defender, which is antivirus, as well as Windows Search, which certainly is not. But it kind of proves our point that we are kind of committed to that flexibility and letting you choose the services that you want to monitor as AV. Before we go too far, we can also see the available patches. And so it's going to show you what patches this machine has eligible for install. I'm going to cover patching a little bit later on. Just keep in mind that the same process we use for patching one machine, we use for patching multiple machines. So same level of effort. And then again, we saw the logs page already, so it'll show you any kind of work that's done on this machine. In this case, we were doing a software uninstall. Now, in the top right, we do have a remote control built into Bacon. From your side, it doesn't need any kind of client. It runs completely through the browser. And then on the machine side, it installs alongside the agent. So here, if I click on screen, we're able to pull this machine up, and we can interact with it as system. So any kind of UAC prompts will be accepted. We can always click on those. No risk of like any kind of privilege escalation not working properly. We have the option of typing in text explicitly to bypass the clipboard, as well as we have different creature comforts for both how the screen's rotated and any kind of quality settings to adjust how much bandwidth we need. Then the bottom right, we have different options like locking up the user input if we have to, or opening up a separate chat if maybe that's the app that's not working, so we can always communicate with who's using the computer. Now, in addition to the screen side of things, we also have a shell remote. This is personally my favorite. I'll say it in every demo because I still mean it. This is very, very handy. This allows you to get on the back end of machines. For all the Linux admins, if you've ever had the problem of hopping VPNs to SSH different environments, this is really gonna like kind of help you out specifically. So what we're able to do here is I'm gonna open up PowerShell. And the thing I want to kind of enforce here is that this is an actual shell. It's not just a single process opening up and then pretending like it's a shell and coming back with a command. It does maintain your session. So you are able to go through here and actually run commands like you would if you were on the machine. You can do some like pseudo coding and stuff like that. It's all available to you because this is a real session. It's not like a video or anything like that. It's completely rendered on the page. So you can copy and paste and all that kind of good stuff. It also supports any kind of like faux GUI. So if we're thinking like HTOP on Linux, or maybe like loading bars, whenever you run like SFC scan or DISMs, all the loading bars and stuff will function exactly how you'd expect as though you're on the machine. And this runs a system, so you're unlikely to run into any issues because you're running as that highest level local to the machine. Then next up, kind of rounding out the remote tools, we have our file system remote. This allows you to connect and see the backend file system where you can then download or upload files, which makes the shell and the file system pair very useful. Again, for those Linux admins, this over SCP is going to be just a little bit faster, let's be honest, if you're moving multiple files or just trying to examine the file system. It's always really helpful to have these extra tools where you need them. So from there, let's take a quick look at the software side. We saw this a little bit whenever we went through the overview. This is just a larger version of it. So before we looked at the software for one machine, now we're looking at the software for all machines. So here I'd usually recommend using those filters we talked about so we can kind of filter through what we want to see. So we can see different software installed, how many endpoints have that software, with the option of uninstalling if we'd like to. Over on services, very similar thing. We'll see the services for everybody. Again, split by OS, so filtering is usually pretty helpful. And like before, we're able to see what's been marked as antivirus, change that designation, stuff like that. Now we're going to get to patching. In a little bit, John, I'll call on you just for some additional assistance explaining some features. So let's filter this by Windows. And here we're going to see the patches we have available. So I have one Windows 7 machine, super old, but I do it just to show you how the patches kind of look in this menu. But here it's going to show you all the data we're pulling back from these machines. So we query all the machines, we see what patches they have available, and then we build this table based on that data. So if I select a couple patches here, let's pick one, two, grab this one for some drivers and one of these. And then I go up to Actions and Install. Here we're going to see the patches we chose. And so I have different metadata we're loading in, so we can actually see like the name of it, the version, the categories, also the description. If we were to click on one of these, you'll see that info too. And then we also see if it requires a reboot. Then down below, it's only going to show us the machines that need at least one of these patches. So we'll select a couple of these to install. And then we get down to the scheduling option. So we have install immediately. That's going to run it right away. So all of my machines in this job are online. If any are offline, this job is at best going to get like an incomplete because it can't run on a machine that's not there. For patching, you can also do run when connected. This is going to run it for everyone who's online, and then it's going to queue it for anybody who's offline. That way, they still get the patch next time they check in. Then we have schedule time. That's going to allow you to select a time here. That's going to execute this patch job at the local time on this machine. So I'm over in the East Coast, so it'd be, let's say 6 p.m. EST, or John, if you're in California, it'd be like 6 p.m. PST, that kind of thing. And then lastly, we have relentless mode. And John, I know you like to explain this one, so if you wouldn't mind taking it away.
I love explaining it. So relentless mode, was a customer recommended feature. It was actually someone who was a potential customer at the time, now a customer. And they were like, they made such an obvious statement. I should have known about this, but basically they were like, we need to work on a schedule because we have to get approved by management for a time window. And we're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And they're like, so the scheduling feature is cool, but we need an end time on that schedule, not just a beginning. So with relentless mode, you actually kind of get two features in one, but the first part is that scheduling. And so you can set a beginning time and you can set an end time, and that any time in the future to any time after that. So it could be 5 minutes. That's probably not going to be very likely. Could be, 4 hours, could be 18 hours, 6 minutes, and 3 seconds. It doesn't matter. The point is that you can set your exact outage window, maybe even end it a little bit short just to make sure everything kind of smooths out before you're done. But the real trick with relentless mode is that with all patching nowadays in the operating systems that everyone's using, so it's mostly Windows, but also Mac and also about 8 flavors of Linux, there's all this metadata associated inside of the update, and it kind of knows once it interacts with the system whether or not certain patches go together before they get rebooted. So there's sort of like a grouping and all kinds of weird stuff that happens. But effectively, what that means for you is that you need to get all these patches that you want to get done on the machines that you've selected in that given time window. So part of it's selecting the window, and the other part is usually leaving the default box you see or circle you see at the bottom there, which says yes, reboot endpoint if patch requires. What that's actually saying is that it will patch and it will reboot, but it will pick up the job even after the reboot and keep patching and keep rebooting, because there's a whole series of events that are meant to happen. Let's say you've got 50 patches. There's a good chance there's 3 or 4 reboots required in there to get through all of those. So these 3 patches happen, then it reboots, then these 4 happen and it reboots, and so on and so forth. A lot of times these days, it's all of the non-reboot requiring patches and the first reboot requiring one, it gets all those done, and then it gets the last 3 or 4 or 7 reboot patches in succession. So if you were to watch this happen, it might be 3 or 4 hours, assuming that you have that time, and you'll just see them patch and reboot without you touching it or having to do anything. So one, Dave showed the outage windows earlier. You certainly want to set that against all the machines you're patching that day, since they're going to be up and down.
Good call.
And yep, always a good idea. And of course, you want to make sure your monitoring rules are on in the first place, so that once all the patching is done, if something doesn't come back up, you know about it and can go deal with it. But otherwise, you can go skiing or something, or hang out with your friends. It doesn't matter. The point is that you don't have to sit there and watch it and restart jobs. That's a very antiquated way of doing patching. So relentless, that's the relentless part of relentless mode. But essentially, it's a great feature for you can do patching on any systems, but I particularly like it with servers, and you can have a really good weekend. You can get your weekends back, as we like to say, and just let that thing do all the work. So I'm really glad we built it. People have been using it for the last few years with great efficacy, and I'm still, when I talk to people that got it early on, they're like, I haven't even changed the way this thing is set up. I just keep doing it the same way. I don't even really think about patching anymore. And that's kind of the best thing about having Bacon is patching becomes a really small and easy part of your job. And it's not a very exciting one. So I think I'd want it to be small and easy if I had my choice. So that's it, Dave. That's relentless mode in a nutshell.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Thanks.
You bet.
All right, so I kind of the main of patching. Let's have patch history, kind of rounding this off. So this allows you to see the patch history for all of your machines. So we kind of take this into our own database. And in the Windows world, it's kind of really handy because that patch history tends to change. So different patches will disappear as they're superseded, but in Bacon, we kind of keep everything above board. So you can actually search for these patches and see what has or has not been installed and what kind of patches are available too. So it's going to pull all this information cross-platform, like we always say, for all your different machines. Then we also have our compliance feature. This allows us to just get a visual indicator of how patched our machines are and if they may or may not need some attention. So I've got a couple 100% here. Then I also have some over here that have 80-ish%, but they're missing 263 patches. So this machine probably needs to, in this case, be deleted or possibly upgraded if it's a machine that you're actually using. Then next up, so we have a lot of features we're not going to be able to cover. I do apologize, but we're going to at least cover our managed package feature since it's one of the newer ones. This allows us to intelligently download the latest version of software that we support here and then install or update it on your machines. So how this works is we maintain the actual data on what packages are available, what the latest version is. We kind of check all those sites using a bunch of AI so that we can keep up to date with all these various packages. And then give them a quick virus scan, and then we provide that downloadable link to your server so you can grab these after they've been scanned. Then over here on the right-hand side, we have the state column. What this means is we're able to download a package. Then we also have the option of creating a state for it automatically. And this is how we can actually deploy these to our machines. So much like I deployed those states earlier using the baseline configuration profile, you can make a new profile, let's say just a baseline software profile, and you can push out different bits of software to those machines. Then Bacon will keep those softwares up to date by downloading the latest version here and then pushing it out when appropriate. So that just kind of takes an additional step off of your plate. For any software we don't support, we still have our files and bundles feature. So here you're able to upload different files. These could be scripts, executables, MSIs, packages, you name it, and then push those out to machines. If we have multiple files that you want to push out in an installer, then we have our bundles feature. This allows you to bundle those files together so they'll push out all at once, and then you can execute one. A pretty reasonable example, a pretty relatable example, I should say, is our 365 installer here. So here we have our setup exe, a configuration XML, and a PowerShell script. Bacon will push all three of these files out to a machine. Then it's going to execute that PowerShell script that then calls the executable with the XML and then gives us some more rich output on how that job performs. Kind of finish off here. So we saw the job log table for an individual machine. How this works is Bacon logs a lot of your activity, or really all of your activity in this case. So here you can see that I have some pretty decent logs. These can be an output to like any kind of syslog ingestion, like Graylog or Splunk, things like that. And so you're able to see all my activity here when I was connecting to machines, as well as all of the actual systems activity here. So any kind of jobs that are run, any uninstalls, patches, those all go through here along with all the data on their success ratios, what happened, any kind of output we can provide you. So we try to keep everything as visible to you as possible so you can always depend on the system, and then second check to make sure things that are important to you are actually working in the environment. So kind of without making this webinar twice as long, John, that's the majority of what I have for the overview. Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap up?
No, I think that's good, Dave. I think it's the final webinar of the year. We'll give people a little time to fill out the survey. We do greatly appreciate everyone attending. And again, just reminder, there's a ton of stuff on some of the things Dave's already talked about and a lot more in our Bacon Bits. So you can go on our YouTube channel and check that out. But really appreciate everyone in advance filling out the survey, and hope that you're all excited about your break, and we will talk to you in the new year. So I think that's it, Dave. I think we'll close it out and let everybody do the survey, and that'll be that for today.
Sounds good. Have a good holiday.
Thanks, everybody. Take care now.